Have you ever poured your heart into a painting, only to watch your vision fade away? Your art looks flat and lifeless. Your edges blur when they should sing. Your details, oh, your precious details, just disappear into the canvas like forgotten dreams. You've tried everything. You've bought expensive paints. You've watched the tutorials late into the night, but deep down you know the truth. It's not you. It's the brush. But what if I told you there's hope? What if the perfect stroke, the one that makes your heart soar, was just one brush away? Today, my friend, we're changing everything. Join me as we explore the secret world of the artist's brushes, the faithful flat that carries bold confidence, the tender round that whispers delicate life, the magical filbert that caresses every edge with grace, and so much more. With rich, buttery oils on real canvas, I'll show you stroke by stroke how each one transforms frustration into joy, failure into masterpiece. Because you deserve to paint the way your soul has always dreamed. Don't look away now. Your breakthrough is just moments away. This is more than a video. It's your comeback story. Let's begin.
Here are the different bristle brushes that I have. All 4 of these are natural hog hair bristles, meaning they got the hair from a hog, a pig, a piglet maybe? Either way, they tend to be pretty firm. So what I'm doing is I'm going to demonstrate how these look differently. This is linen, and this is just a palette surface that I'm going to mix the black and the white with. This is bone black and titanium white. I'm gonna first start out with showing you how to use a flat. The flat bristle is a little bit longer, and then there is a bright bristle. The bright bristle is about half the length, so it's a much more stiff brush. I like the flat because it gives a little bit of bounce at the end, which allows me to have better control and or give up some control depending upon what you're actually doing. The bright brushes I personally don't like because they're a bit too stiff and they cut into shapes too much. So I'm gonna take white and black and make a gray so that you can see what I'm going to be doing. I'll take more white and more black, too much, and make a darker gray. Let's go darker. Now, flat is really nice because of the mark that it can make. So if I come in here and take some of this paint and I just place it on the canvas, relatively dry, you can see that the texture is coming through. Started off firm, and then as soon as the paint got on the surface, the texture starts to come through. This is called dry brushing. But if I want to make it so it's more solid, I will mix the paint and I will pick up a little bit with the bristle brush and come across the surface and pull it down. And the more times I pull it down, the more it's going to fill into those little grooves of the canvas. So there's the gray. Wipe off my brush, I'm gonna come in and get this darker value. There's a little bit more paint. Gonna go on both sides, come in, and I'm gonna put it right next to the lighter gray. You can see the same thing is happening. Get some more paint. If you want a very, very hard edge, just go back and forth a couple of times and it will create a harder edge. Now, to show you how to mix with these two, there are a couple of different ways to be able to do it. I'm gonna mix the difference between the two. If I have this darker value and this lighter value and I want it to soften so it looks like the form is softly turning, I can get a mixture between the two values and come in and place it on there and go between the two. See how that softened out the transition between the two? The other thing that I can do with this brush is go over it multiple times in the middle and flip. So there I'm flipping back and forth to be able to soften out those values. If I have enough paint on my canvas, I can come into these lighter values. I'm just gonna actually get more paint, so I'll just show you. Come into this lighter value here, fill it in just a little bit more. That's the other nice thing about a flat is you can turn it on its side and do a thin stroke. It's like you have two brushes in one, a wide one and a thin one. So if I come in here and go over it one more time and move from the lights into those darker halftones, I will make a gradient. So now it's turning form. So that's the nice thing about a flat. You can get thin, small detailed shapes, or you can get flatter, thinner. The other nice thing too is if I come back here in this darker value, if I don't want this soft of an edge, that's the edge of this brush that's kind of going across the canvas, I can make it a harder edge by just coming with the tip and coming down the form to make a really hard edge. So really diverse brush. The other benefit of this is over time it eventually turns into a filbert. These edges get cut off and or a cat's tongue or a filbert, whatever you want to call it. But that's what will happen with the flat. It will not stay flat for a very long time, especially if you're using it to cut in shapes. Okay, next brush. This is a filbert, so you can see the difference between the two, the flat versus the filbert. It's about the same length, it's about the same size of brush, a little bit more of a peak in the filbert, but it allows for rounding of forms. So if I get this darker value, more paint, both sides, and I go right underneath here, I put the form down. You can see that it starts with the harder edge and then softens because of the texture. I'm gonna get more paint. Scoop up some of that paint, put it down, go to the other side, put it down. You can see how soft of an edge the filbert makes. Rounded at the top, soft on the edges, harder on the top. So it makes the shape of the brush. Except that, if I go into this lighter value, have a good amount of paint. I'm painting it right next to the other one, filling in those shapes. Now I have a hard edge between the two. How do I get a softer edge between those two? I just need to mix a value that's in between the two. There it goes, softens it out. The filbert is better for softening out edges than the flat. And I'll show you here. I wiped off most of the paint from this brush. I'm gonna go from these lighter values, move over into the middle value, move over into that darker value. So now you can see how much softer of a transition this filbert creates versus the flat. This is a round brush. The round brush is used by a lot of artists. I'm gonna do the same thing that I did with the other brushes. Here we go with the darker value, more paint. It fills in better, the round. There are more bristles concentrated in the whole entire tip because of its dimension. So it can hold on to paint and fill in spaces really, really well versus the other two, which are thinner in one direction. So here I've created this darker value. Now I'll go with the lighter value. The other nice thing about bristle brushes is you can hold more paint on it. So here I go with this line. Now I have these two values. If I'm going to create an intermediate value, go between the two, wipe it off so it is basically a dry brush. I'm gonna come from this lighter value and move into the darker. So you can see how soft of a gradient that one creates. Now you might not be able to see how soft they are, but the round one definitely creates a better gradient and it flattens out the strokes more. The filbert softens out form, good. A lot of figure painters like to use the filbert for softening flesh tones. And then the flat creates slightly harder edges compared to the other two. Now, the other thing I want to point out before I do the last paintbrush is texture. If I do a horizontal brush stroke, my light is coming from the top. So you can see my cast shadow there. It's coming from behind the camera. And if I take paint and I get a good amount, if I use this round brush and I do a horizontal stroke, let's get some more paint on there. You can see the texture is picking up little highlights. Hopefully you can see that. If you can't, that really sucks. But it's picking up these highlights based off of the ridges in the paint film. I'm gonna go back to the filbert and do the same thing. If I do a horizontal stroke, I need more paint. Okay, maybe you can see the reflection a little bit more on the filbert. You can see the lights bouncing off of the ridges. I'll go with the flat. Now, hopefully you can see some of the reflection that's going off on all those. So bristle brushes, depending upon the direction that you're going, you'll get a reflection off of your light source. Now, if we go with the fan brush, there are other brushes besides these four, but these four are the major ones that I like to use. If I use this fan brush, get a middle value, it doesn't mix as well, which is kind of fun when you're creating some artwork with variation. If I come in here and put in this flat value, you can see that it doesn't really fill in. It's because it's so thin in this direction, it can't hold on to that much paint. So I need to get more paint, scoop it up a little bit. There it starts to fill in. Now I'm gonna go with a lighter value. You can see how much more streaky it is because the fan brush doesn't mix as well. It is dispersed little hairs as opposed to condensing all of the hairs. So if you want a good soft value where the paint film is mixed together well, you want to use the round. If you want to have good subtle transitions but a little bit more paint quality and softer edges, use the Filbert. If you want to have harder edges and fill in flat shapes, general flat shapes like a poster study, use a flat. And then if you want more variation in your paint quality, you'll want to use a fan brush. Now a lot of people, especially Bob Ross, talks about using a fan brush and the benefits of it. So I'm gonna make this a little bit lighter and I'm gonna show you the benefits of using a fan brush. So here I have my lighter shape and my shadow or darker shape. When I clean off my bristle, basically have a dry brush, I can come in here and I don't have to add more paint. If I have enough paint on there, I can just pet it a couple of times and it will totally soften out that value transition. If you come in with a sai, you can tap it to create different textures. That's how Bob Ross did his happy little trees. He would just scoop up some paint and go, happy little trees, so happy. And that would give you some softer edges. It uses the texture of the canvas, but it's really good to be able to mix things. If you push down hard with it and try to mix it like that, you're gonna get more variation. If you hold it at a subtle angle and just kind of glide over it, it will remove the texture and it will flatten out the shapes, almost like a sable brush, which is what we'll go into next.
Sable is very, very soft. It bends and is a lot more flexible than the hog. You can see how shiny it is. It's new and shiny, so shiny.
And the nice thing about sables is you can use them for good detail work. Because this is a synthetic sable, because the plastic that is making these hairs is so very thin, it doesn't hold on to as much paint. So I'm gonna show you the difference between all of these various sables. Here's a flat, there's a filbert, here's a fan, and here's a round. They don't really make too many sable rounds for oil painting. They mostly have sable rounds for watercolor because it disperses more water evenly. But for oil painting, it's not that common. Here I have a sable mixing the paint. Even if I go over it multiple times, you can see that it's not changing it that much. That's because it's not pushing down, it's not firm like a bristle brush. So I have to get more paint and push it down even more. So, sables, very, very soft. They don't hold that much paint. Now I'm gonna go with lighter value. But look at the edge quality that it makes. I mean, that is a razor sharp edge. What? So awesome. In order to get that razor sharp edge, you have to have a lot of paint. If you don't, you'll end up scrubbing with the sable and you'll make softer edges with the sable because the paint's so thin. All right, to mix the two with the sable, you can mix a value that's gonna be between the two, or because it's a sable and you have enough paint on there, you can just go in from one side and slowly move over. You can do the same thing to the other side. Just petting the paint. There you go. Look at how soft that is. So nice. Almost as soft as the fan brush for the Bristle fan brush. All right, so that is the Filbert shape. It is rounded, it creates hard edges if you have enough paint, and you have to really load up the paint for a sable to make a difference, but it really softens out shapes. Here's a flat. This one is a Langnickle Royal Sable. This is a little bit stiffer than a regular sable. A sable at this length would be very, very soft and fluffy, and it feels so nice, but this Royal Sable, it's a mongoose hair and it is springy. It's almost as firm as a bristle brush, but the diameter of the hairs are much smaller. All right, this is just straight paint, no medium.
So if I come in here,
look at that. There's like hardly anything. I really got to load up this brush. Now to me, this Langnickle, there we go, load that thing up. This Langnickle is a lot like a fan brush. The shape gets distorted when you push down on it, and it doesn't mix that well, so it keeps some inconsistencies. The other downside about this is you get little stray hairs that will come off. Just pick them out. So here I have my darker value. Look at that nice hard edge. Man, it's the nice thing about sables. You can get these beautiful hard edges, but it's hard to fill. I mean, look at how many times I had to push down on it just to fill in that shape. All right, same thing with the Langnickle. I'm just gonna go, I'm turning it to the side so I have a smaller shape. And I'm gonna go from this light into the shadows, back into the light. Look at how nice of a transition that is. So that's a Langnickle. This next one is the round. This is great for details, but when I'm finishing up a painting, if I want to focus on one little area, I will go with a small paintbrush like this. Look at how small that is. Can you imagine doing an entire painting with this brush? That would take forever. I've seen it, people do it all the time. This is actually the type of brush that I have students use. I had a professor that told me it's called milking the mouse. You come in with the detail and you do this. Milk, milk, milk. Milking the mouse. Now if we go with a lighter value off to the side, again, these do not hold very much paint compared to a bristle. A bristle can hold a lot more paint, but look at that edge. Man, it's so freaking hard. It's like a razor's edge. And then the nice thing about the sables is you can come in between the two and blend them in perfect harmony. Last one I'm going to show you is this fan brush. It is a Sable fan brush. It is synthetic in hair, and just like the bristle, see how it spreads out? This will make more scratchy marks because it is such a soft hair. Gonna get more paint, try to fill in that space. It's really hard to fill in, but once you do get it put in, this will soften things out like no other. All right, lighter value. I have to turn it on the side so it will actually fill in all the shapes, or fill in the texture of the canvas. All right, look at how it's broken up. So in order to make this a good fan brush, instead of broken up like this, I gotta wipe most of the paint off of it. So it unclumps it a little bit, and I can come in here from the light side and go into that shadow side, and from the shadow side back into the light side. All right, look at how soft that makes it. Man, it's so soft. The difference between the bristle and the sable is this other important part. I'm gonna go back to the golden brush here and a filbert shape, and I'm going to do a horizontal stroke. Now, because I did a horizontal stroke with this, I can't see any ridges from this brush that the light is being picked up on. So if you want to flatten out shapes or forms and not have texture and not have glare coming off of your painting, use sable brushes. You can also mitigate that issue by adding some medium and make it a little bit more thin so it doesn't have so much body to the paint. I'm gonna go with the Langnickle and do the same thing, show you how it doesn't show the ridges. I mean, you have to get enough paint on there, which is hard to do with sables. You can scoop it up and throw it on there, which is what I'm doing, but makes it tricky. All right, again, not really ridges. If you're seeing reflections, it's not because of the paint film, but because of the texture of the canvas. All right, just to summarize, over on the left here, we use the sables. Over on the right, we use the bristle. The bristle brushes applies more paint. The sable applies less paint. You have to do more brush strokes with the sable to fill in shapes versus the bristle because it can hold more paint. You'll get better and softer edges and harder edges if you use the sable versus the bristle. What I like to do when I'm using both of them is I will have all of my dark values, I will paint them with a sable most of the time. And the sable will make it flat and not reflect light that is on the surface of the canvas as much. Then in the lights, I will use a bristle brush because this will provide texture. And sometimes I use that texture with the light bouncing off of it to describe shapes better. So I will use both of these brushes. I tend to like to use flat brushes because they eventually turn into filberts. And I don't really like using round brushes because they fill in shapes too much and create too flat of a shape in the lights. But I know a lot of artists that will only use round brushes the whole time because they like how it fills in the shapes. The bristle holds on to enough paint to be able to apply to the canvas, and they don't get textures like you can see with the light bouncing off of the paint film. So I'd recommend trying both of them, trying lots of different shapes. You'll have some shapes that are beneficial versus some that are not. I like to use a fan brush every once in a while when I'm mixing two larger, thick bodies of paint. And I will use it not to soften out transitions like this. I'll use it to create different textures like that. And then clean off the brush, and if I want to soften it down, I'll hold it at the edge and pull it across to soften out the textures. So that's why I like to use fan brushes every once in a while, but I don't use it all the time. Most of the time, 90% of my paintings, I will use a bristle brush, especially when starting out. Bristle brushes tend to last longer. If you scrub with a bristle brush, you'll make it into more of a filbert or a cat's tongue. If you scrub with a sable, you'll totally destroy your paintbrush because the oil is pretty thick. With watercolor, scrubbing works totally fine. But in oil paint, because it's so bodied, you'll destroy your sable. The other thing, quick little tip, try not to get the paint all the way down into the ferrule. Keep your paint at the end of your paintbrush. And you don't want to push your paintbrush into the canvas when painting like that. You want to pull it across or keep the top on the surface. That way you're not going to push paint down into the ferrule. That will fray the paintbrush and make it so that it does not work as the appropriate tool that you purchased it for. But sometimes that is fun with paintbrushes. You can destroy your paintbrushes and use them till the end of days. Here's a paintbrush that I have used for about 15 years. It's basically a cat's tongue. Here you can see how it comes to a point. This used to be a flat, then it turned into a filbert, and now it is a cat's tongue. And I will still use it to cut in shapes or to do flat values or make softer transitions or put some paint on the tip and just throw it onto the canvas. But I use almost all my paintbrushes. I rarely throw them away. I hope this video was informative for you, and I hope you have an excellent day.